CDL pre-trip. You should do your pre-trip the same way each time so you don't forget what you're doing. That way you don't miss anything. When you come up to the truck, first thing you want to do is make sure you have your keys. And you want to make sure your wheels are chalked and your brakes are released. That way you'll be able to check your slack adjusters later on during the pre-trip. As you'll see around the corner here, we do have our wheels chalked. So that way the truck will not move. We also have the key in our pocket. That way nobody could hop in while we're doing a pre-trip and walk off with it or drive off with it. First thing you want to do with a pre-trip, you want to do your overview inspection. You're going to come up to the truck. You want to notice general condition. First thing I'd notice is I want to look to make sure the truck's not leaning to one side or the other. This would indicate a suspension problem down the road. I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. Then I'm going to work from front to back, side to side. Starting at the top, I want to check my clearance lights. First thing I'm going to check for is condition. I want to make sure that they're in good shape. They're not cracked, broken, or dirty. I'm going to check the operation later on in the pre-trip. Next, I want to check my windshield. I want to check to make sure that my windshield is not cracked, broken, dirty, has no illegal stickers on it. I'm going to come and check my mirrors. I want to make sure my mirrors are securely fastened to the truck. They're not broke, cracked, and missing. I want to make sure the glass on the mirrors is in good condition, that I don't see any cracks in the mirrors and that they're securely fastened as well. Coming around the side of the truck here again, I'm going to check my windshield wipers. We have to go to the other side to reach the one that I can see, but I want to make sure that the wiper blades are in good condition. Make sure that they're touching the windshield firmly. Make sure I see no tears or rips in the wiper blades themselves. Checking the windshield wiper, I can tell that it's got tension against it, and I can make sure that it's going to sit firmly against the windshield. While I'm here, I also want to check the mirror on this side. Make sure it's securely fastened, it's not broken, damaged, or missing, and make sure that there's no breaks or cracks in the glass of the mirror itself. Make sure they're clean. When we get inside, we'll check to make sure that they're adjusted properly. To the front of the truck, coming down, I want to check the side mirror I got here. Make sure again that this is securely fastened, it's not broken, damaged, missing, and the glass is in good condition. I want to check my turn signal on this side. Every truck's going to be a little different. This one here happens to have them on the fender. I want to make sure that the lens cover on this side, the red, is in good condition. It's not cracked or broken, that is clean. I'm going to check my amber on the front to make sure that the amber on the front of the lens is not broken, damaged, or missing, and that it's clean. I also want to check my reflector here on the side. Some are built into the lamp, some are built into the reflector, to the turn signals, but I want to make sure that my reflector is in good condition, that it's not broken, cracked, or missing. I want to check my headlight. I want to make sure that the headlight is not dirty, it's not cracked or broken, and that it's in good condition. Coming across the front of the vehicle, I want to check my grille. I want to make sure the grille has no obstructions in it that would cause my vehicle to overheat. I also want to make sure that all the ribs on the grill are in good condition. Coming down, I want to check my bumper. I want to make sure that the bumper is securely fastened to the truck. Make sure it's not dented, broken, no bolts are missing. And I also want to check my tag if it's on the front of the vehicle to make sure that it's a current tag. February of 10. We're in good condition. Coming across, I want to make sure that my light on this side again, clean, not broken, damaged, not dirty. I want to check my turn signal up here. I want to check the front lens cover on this side, make sure it's clean and not broken or damaged. Check my reflector on the side. I want to make sure my reflector is not cracked, broken, or damaged. Make sure it's clean. I want to check my red on the back to make sure that it's clean, not broken or damaged in any way. When I step back from the vehicle, I want to look underneath. And I want to make sure I don't see any leaks coming from the vehicle that would indicate any problems as far as fluid. I see no leaks. Now we're going to do the engine compartment of the vehicle. We want to make sure that everything under the hood is in good condition as well as everything on the outside. First thing I want to do is I'm going to walk up and make sure that the latches to my hood are undone. These have already been undone for us, both sides. I'm going to go ahead and open the hood. Before doing so, I'll check both sides of the vehicle to make sure there's nobody in the way. When I grab onto the hood support, put my foot in the footrest, I'll yell clear to make sure nobody's there, and open the hood. 2 hands to make sure the hood does not fall on you. We'll start on this side of the motor. We'll check things on this side first, and then we'll go to the other side to continue our engine inspection. Again, we want to start at the top, work our way down, front to back, side to side. First thing I'm going to notice on the front of the motor, I want to check all my hoses and all my wiring. I'm checking my hoses to make sure I don't see any cuts, frays, damage, or where the hoses may be worn and there's no leaks. Checking my radiator hose that's going down in here to my water pump. My water pump is gear driven on this vehicle. I'm looking to make sure I have no leaks coming around my water pump. I want to make sure the hoses are in good condition. They're not leaking as well. My heater hoses, the same thing. I'm making sure they're not worn or leaking. not leaking, and making sure they're not rubbing against anything. I want to check the wires here going to my alternator. I want to make sure all the wires that I see don't have any frays in them. They're not cut. They're not broken. Everything seems to be plugged in where it should be. Checking the wires on the back of my alternator. I want to make sure they're securely fastened. They're not loose. I see no frays or cuts in those as well. I want to make sure that my alternator itself is securely fastened to its bracing, which it is. I want to check to make sure the alternator belt. This vehicle has a one belt system that runs everything, but I'm going to check the belt on every component I can. I want to make sure the belt has no more than 1/2 inch of play in it. Make sure the belt's in good condition. There's no frays, there's no tears, no rips, it's not worn. I want to check my fan blade while I'm here. I want to make sure the fan blade is in good condition. I don't see any broken fan blades on it itself. It's not rubbing against anything. Everything seems to be mechanically sound. I want to check my oil next. I want to pull my dipstick out so I can physically check the oil to make sure that we have enough. I'm going to pull the dipstick out. I'm going to wipe my dipstick off. I suggest that you have a rag or a paper towel. Put my dipstick back in. I'm going to pull it back out again, and I'm going to check the oil level of the vehicle to make sure that it's in proper level. This one could use a little bit of oil. And I'll replace my dipstick. Make sure that you tighten it back down if you have this type of clamp. From there, we've checked everything on this side. There's more hoses. We want to make sure nothing's leaking, nothing's rubbing. I want to check my airline that's going into my turbo to make sure I don't see any cracks or any holes or anything that might cause a problem down the road. We want to travel to the other side of the vehicle now. We're on the other side of the engine compartment now. Again, we're going to start at the top, work our way down. I want to check my hoses that I can reach on this side, make sure I don't see any cuts, frays, or damage. No worn or leaking hoses. I want to check my coolant reservoir. On this vehicle, we can look at the coolant tank to make sure that we have enough coolant inside our reservoir, which we do. It shows it's at the minimum, just above it, with a cool engine. With the engine warm, it should not be above the maximum. On vehicles that do not have a reservoir or a sight glass that we could look in, we would have to check it through the radiator. Now, we would do that when the engine is cool, though. We would not check it while it was hot. Coming down from the coolant level reservoir, we're going to check the hose that's going back into our water pump. We want to make sure that it is not frayed or leaking or cut or rubbing against anything. Checking our wiring again that we can see. We want to make sure any wiring on the vehicle is not frayed or cut or could in any way be damaged while driving. We want to come there and we want to check our air compressor. This is our air compressor right here. We want to make sure the air compressor is securely mounted to the vehicle. This one here is gear driven. We want to make sure that we hear no audible leaks coming from the air compressor. We want to check all the air lines that come off it to make sure we hear no audible leaks that are not cut, frayed, worn in any way. From the air compressor, we want to check our power steering pump. Our power steering pump is hidden. There's a cap or cover over it, but our power steering pump is down here. It is gear driven off the vehicle. We would check our power steering pump if we could see it. We would check the pulley to make sure the pulley is not worn. If there was a belt, we would make sure that the belt had no more than 1/2 inch of play, that it was not worn or frayed or weather cracked in any way. We'd also check to make sure that the power steering pump is not leaking. From the power steering pump, we're going to come across and check our steering linkage. We're going to grab our steering linkage, make sure we have no more play in it than necessary, make sure it's not bent, broken. We want to make sure down at the knuckles, at the universal joint, that they're well greased, that we see no shiny metal would indicate that they were loose or wearing against each other. We would also make sure we see no bends in it. From there, we're going to check our power steering reservoir. This is our reservoir. Some vehicles do not have a dipstick. In that case, when you pull their cap off, you would just put your finger in there to see that you had enough fluid. If you could touch the fluid, it would be fine. However, this one has a dipstick. We would wipe the dipstick off, stick it back in, pull it back out, and check to make sure we had enough fluid. From the power steering reservoir, we're going to check our power steering lines that are going into our gearbox. We want to make sure that the power steering lines are not rubbing against anything. They're not frayed or broken. We see no leaks on these. There's 2 lines here, one from the reservoir, one going back into the pump. From there, we're going to check our power steering gearbox. Our gearbox, we want to make sure that it's securely fastened to the frame of the truck. We want to make sure it's not loose in any way and that all nuts are tight. At the steering box, we also want to check our pitman arm. We want to make sure the pitman arm is not worn, that it's not bent, and that all the bolts are tight. This one happens to have a castle nut. We would make sure with the castle nut that it was tight and that it had a cotter key in where it should be and that it was not missing. From the pitman arm, we're going down here, we're going to check our drag link. We want to make sure the drag link is not bent or broken, make sure it's not loose in any way that we cannot move it. That would indicate we'd have a steering problem. From the pitman arm, or from the drag link, we're going to check our spring hangers. This is our front spring hanger. We'd make sure that all the bolts are tight. Make sure it's not broken, dented in any way, or cracked. Make sure that the spring hanger attached to the spring is in good condition. We're going to check our spring. We want to make sure that our spring has no shifted, missing, or broken springs that would create a problem. We want to come down here and check our U-bolts. We want to make sure that both U-bolts are tight, and we would reach under the vehicle to make sure that the U-bolts had nuts on them and that they were tight. We're going to go to the back and check our rear spring hanger. We want to make sure that the rear spring hanger is securely fastened to the vehicle. It's not broken, that all bolts and nuts are tight. From there, we're going to come back and check our shock on our suspension. We want to check our shock, grab it, make sure that the shock is not loose in any way, that it's not dented, and that we see no fluid leaking from the shock. From the shock, we're going to check, make sure that our air lines going into our brake chamber are still in good condition. We see no cracks, we see no holes or rub where the line may leak. We'd also listen for any audible leaks coming out of the air lines. Where the air line goes into the brake chamber right here, we would make sure that it's securely fastened, make sure our brake chamber is securely fastened as well. And the main thing we want to check is to make sure that this clamp going around the brake chamber is in good condition and tight, that there's no looseness there, and that we hear no audible leaks. On the front of the truck has no spring in the spring brake, or into the brake chamber as be. We would check to make sure that we had no more free play in the slack adjuster, no more than 1 inch, and that is with the vehicle wheels chalked, the engine off, and the brakes released. We would pull on the slack adjuster in the front to make sure we had no more than that 1 inch of play. It seems to be right within the range. We would check the push rod coming out of the brake chamber to make sure it was not bent or broken, and make sure that where it attaches right here to the slack adjuster, that it had a pin and a cotter pin to hold the pin in place. From the slack adjuster and the push rod, we're going to go down here and we're going to check our brakes, our inner rim, and our brake shoe, our brake drum. As we go down here, we want to check the condition of our tire as we're going down to check our brake system. We want to check the inside of our front tire to make sure we see no cuts, knots, or abrasions, or if you want to use the ABC approach, abrasions, bulges, or cuts. We want to make sure the tire is in good condition. We're going to check the inside of our rim, make sure we don't see any cracks or welds other than factory on the inside of our rim here. We would run our hand around just to make sure of that. This vehicle has a dust cover covering the brake shoes and the brake drum. If we did not have the dust cover, we'd be able to see in there. What we would look for, since we can't see it, we would check the brake shoes to make sure that they were not worn dangerously thin. They must have at least a 1/4 inch of lining on them to be safe. We'd make sure there's no grease, oil, or soot on the brake shoes as well, which would indicate we could have a wheel seal leak from the wheel. We're going to check our brake drum to make sure that we have no cracks or welds in the brake drum other than factory, and no more than 1/2 the width of the friction area is cracked. We would also check that for any grease, soot, or oil on them that would indicate we'd have a stopping problem as far as the brakes. From the brakes and from the back of the wheel here, we're going to go to the top of the tire. On the top of the tire, we're going to check for even tread wear on the front tire. Front tire on the front of a vehicle should not be, but can be, a recap. It's best to have a virgin rubber on the front. We do not put recap tires on the front of a bus, but they can be used on other vehicles. We want to make sure that our tread depth on the front tire is no less than 4/32 of an inch tread depth. More would be better. Make sure we have even tread wear, and we see again no abrasions, bulges, or cuts on the top of the tire. As we go to the outside of our tire, we want to check again the outside of our front tire. We want to make sure we have no more abrasions, cuts, or bulges. Again, if you want to use the ABC approach, abrasions, bulges, or cuts, that's fine. We want to make sure the tire is in good condition. We want to check the outside of our rim. We want to make sure the rim has no welds or cuts other than factory, and there's no cracks in the rim. Going to our lug nuts, we're going to check each individual lug nut by hand to make sure that they're tight, that we see no rust streaks coming off the lug nuts would indicate a loose lug nut. If it was, we'd get it tightened. We're also going to look for shiny threads on there, which could also indicate a loose nut. Going from the lug nuts, we're going to check our front hub seal. This is a hub seal, not an axle seal. We want to make sure that we see no leaks coming around the hub seal. It is not recommended that we pull these caps because they could crack, but if we could, we would look in there and check with our finger to make sure we had enough fluid in them. Main thing is we want to make sure there's no leaks. The last thing we want to check on our tire is to make sure that we have a metal valve stem and cap and that they're in place. With this, we would want to check the inflation of our tires to whatever the manufacturer spec may be. We would check the tire to see what it said. We would check this with either with a tire gauge or with a mallet to make sure that we had enough air pressure. With the mallet, you're not going to know the air pressure, but you will know if the tire is flat or needs air. As we go to the next section of the vehicle, I want to make sure my hood's closed and my hood latches are in place. I want to start from here. Again, I'm going to check my mirrors again just to be on the safe side. I want to make sure my mirrors are completely attached to the vehicle. They're not broken, damaged, or missing, and they're securely fastened. Again, checking my glass to make sure that the glass is intact and there's nothing wrong with it. I want to check my door handle here. I want to make sure that my door handle works, that my door will open and close freely and that there's no obstruction. Checking my handle, checking my latch to make sure that works, and checking this side as well. I'm going to check my window on my driver's door. I want to make sure it rolls up and down properly, that it's not broken, that it stays on track. I'm going to check, close my door, open it, make sure it opens fine. I want to check my door seal around here. Sometimes they're on the door, sometimes they're right here. I want to make sure that I have a good door seal, that I don't see any cracks or rips in it that could let poisonous gas into the vehicle while I'm driving if my window's up. Check to make sure the door is shut fine. I want to check my handhold here on the side. I want to make sure it's securely fastened as well. Coming down, I'm going to check my fuel tank cap. I'm going to take my cap and I want to look inside it. And I want to make sure I have a change for one. I want to make sure I have a rubber seal in my cap. I want to make sure it fastens completely. And that I see no visible signs of any leaks of diesel fuel around my cap. Make sure it's secure. I want to check the straps on my tank. I want to make sure I got at least a rubber seal between the metal so I don't have metal on metal rubbing. That could cause a problem. Make sure the seal is in good condition. My straps are tight on both sides here and that I have seals on both sides. I want to check my steps on my tractor. I want to make sure they're securely fastened, they're not bent, broken, or damaged in any way, and that there's no loose articles that could cause me to slip as I get in and out of the vehicle. Checking both steps as I'm doing this to make sure that they're in good condition, not loose, broken, or missing any parts. Next, I want to stand back and I want to look underneath the vehicle and I want to make sure I see no leaks of any sort coming from the tanks, from the fuel tanks. Coming to the back of the tractor, I want to start by checking my lines on the back of the tractor. First thing I want to check is my electrical line. I want to make sure that it's plugged in properly and that the safety catch is over top on the electric line. I want to make sure it's in good condition. I'm going to check my electric line all the way back to the trailer. Make sure it's supported properly, that it's not rubbing, that will not be pinched against anything. I see no frayed wires. I see no exposed wires. I want to check the connection back here to make sure that it's properly seated into the trailer and that my safety latch is over the top. Coming back here, again, I want to check my air lines going into the tractor. I want to make sure I hear no audible leaks coming from them, that's securely fastened. I'm going to check both lines as I come to the trailer, my emergency line and my service line. I want to make sure I see no cracks in the line, no bends, no kinks, no holes. I'm listening for audible leaks. Make sure they're properly secured, properly fastened, and held out of the way so therefore they would not rub against anything. When I get back to the trailer, I want to check my glad hands on my emergency line and on my service line. Now, in doing this, I want to pull these apart and I want to check the grommets inside. I want to make sure that the grommets are not torn or ripped. Make sure they're in good condition on both the glad hand of the airline and also on the trailer where they hook together. I would do the same thing with my emergency line. I would pull it off, check my grommet to make sure it's in good condition on both the trailer and on the airline. Hook them back together. Again, I am checking to make sure that I hear no audible leaks coming from either end of the tractor or the trailer where they connect. Making sure my airlines are fully supported, that they're not going to rub against anything. Next, I want to check my catwalk and steps on the back of the tractor. I want to make sure the steps on the back are in good condition, they're not broken or loose, and there's no obstructions. I want to check my catwalk on the tractor, and I want to make sure there's no loose or obstructions on the catwalk and make sure the catwalk itself is secure. While I'm here, I want to check the frame of my tractor. I want to make sure I see no bends or cracks or welds or drills holes other than factory on this. Should also not be any welds on the frame other than factory. I'm going to check the whole frame across, both sides, best I can. While I'm here, I also would like to check my drive shaft. I will get down, I'm going to check my drive shaft by grabbing a hold of it, and I want to turn to make sure it's not loose. I want to make sure the universal joints are well greased. I see no shiny metal on there, and I want to make sure I see no dents in my drive shaft, that's not bent. Now I need to go around to the other side. I want to check my exhaust system to make sure I have no leaks. So we will go to the other side of the vehicle at this time. I'm going to check my exhaust system. On most tractors, your exhaust is going to come out into a stack on the back of the tractor. You would check to make sure it was securely fastened, that the stack was not too high, that it would be over height, and you'd make sure you see no soot coming from any of the connections. I also want to check on this one. This one comes out to the side and underneath the tractor. I'm going to check to make sure all my elbows, all my clamps, wherever there may be one, have no black soot or anything coming out from around the clamps would indicate a leak. I check the muffler itself and I make sure I don't see any holes in the muffler. It's not rusted out. The clamps that were holding it and the braces are securely fastened. I see no black soot coming from it. Checking the pipe coming out the back, which would be like the stack on the top. Again, I'm checking to make sure I don't see any soot that would indicate that it would be loose, that would let poisonous gas into the cab. All right, as we come back to the other side of the vehicle, now we want to start checking our coupling system, working our way down again from the top, work our way down to the bottom, front to back again. We've done our exhaust, now we're back on this side. We want to look up under here and we want to check the coupling of the truck. We want to make sure we see no visible space between the upper and lower fifth wheel. Upper fifth wheel, lower fifth wheel. We also want to check the apron of our trailer while we're here. We want to make sure we don't see any cracks or bends or anything that would damage our fifth wheel coupling here. And the apron of the trailer looks in good shape. We've got plenty of grease on our fifth wheel. We want to make sure we have that as well. That cuts down on friction. We want to check our platform that the fifth wheel is mounted to right here. We want to make sure the platform of the fifth wheel is firmly bolted to the frame of the tractor and that all the mounting bolts here are in place. They're all tight, nothing loose, no missing bolts. If this had a sliding fifth wheel, we would make sure that the pins were engaged and that the sliding fifth wheel was in good condition. From this point here, we want to check our release arm and safety latch. On the release arm and safety latch, we want to make sure that the release arm is in and that the safety latch here is over the locking lever. With that being done, we want to go to the back here and we want to check our kingpin, and we also want to check to make sure the locking jaw is around the shank of the kingpin. Looking back in here, we can see that the locking jaws are again around the shank of the kingpin. We want to make sure also that our kingpin is not bent, damaged in any way. Make sure the locking jaws are tight. Notice the overall condition of your fifth wheel in the back to make sure everything looks in good condition. Checking the frame of the tractor as we come back through. We also want to make sure that we have no cracks or bends in our frame. We want to come down and check our tail lights on the back of the tractor. Most tractors are going to have single tail lights that have all the units inside. We want to make sure the lenses are clean, they're not broken or damaged, to make sure they're working properly. We'll check operation later. Our turn signals are built in, so therefore we got our left and our right and our four ways. We have our tail lights and our brake lights all built into one unit. Our backup lens, we also want to check that lens as well. It's not that we need it, but it's there if we have to. Check to make sure we have a tag light back here that works properly when we do our light operation check. As we come out, we want to check on the outside. We want to check our wheels and our brake drums when we get around to the front. All right, as we're underneath the tractor again, we want to check our drive shaft again since we can see it. We want to check the rear universals to make sure they're in good condition, that they're well greased. We don't see any shiny metal indicate a loose part. We're going to check our air lines coming back here to our brake chambers. We want to make sure our air lines are in good condition, make sure we don't see any cracks, any breaks, or any abrasions, and we don't hear any audible leaks. While we're here, we can check our spring hangers on both sides. These are our front spring hangers. We want to make sure that they're securely mounted to the tractor, no broken, damaged, or missing parts, and make sure that the bolts are tight. Okay? From here, we're going to come down. We want to check our brake chamber now that our air lines go to. We want to make sure our brake chambers are securely mounted, that the clamps on both sides are tight, and that we hear no audible air leaks coming from the brake chamber. On the rear of the brake chamber, we want to check our slack adjusters. We want to check and make sure that the slack adjusters have no more than 1 inch of play in the slack adjuster with our wheels chalked, which they are, and our brakes released. We're going to pull on our slack adjuster, and where it meets the push rod, we shouldn't have any more than 1 inch of play. As we push, we notice that we do not have that inch of play. We want to check our push rod, make sure that it's not bent or damaged, and that the pin has a cotter pin in the other side to hold it. We want to make sure again that the slack adjuster is not damaged in any way. From there, we're going to go to our rim or our tire. We're going to go to our tire. We're going to do the ABCs again. We're going to check our tire for any abrasions, bulges, or cuts. Make sure we have done. We want to go to our inside of our rim on our inside wheel. We want to check to make sure the inside of the rim here has no welds or cuts other than factory. Now that we can see the brake drum and brake shoes, we want to check those as well. We want to check our brake shoes to make sure that they're not worn dangerously thin, that there's no grease or oil on them that would cause any problems braking. We want to check our brake drum here to make sure that the brake drum has no cracks or welds other than factory, and that there's no cracks more than 1/2 the friction area. From there, we want to check our spring as we come out. Stop. As we check our spring, we want to make sure we have no cracked, broken, or shifted leaf springs on the back of our springs here. We want to check and make sure that our U-bolts here that are bolted to the springs and axle are securely mounted and that the nuts are all tight. We want to come back here and check our rear spring hanger. Our rear spring hanger should be securely mounted to the tractor frame, and there should be no loose, broken, or missing parts. As we're under here, we want to notice the overall condition underneath the frame of our tractor, any air lines or any air tanks. Make sure that we're, again, listening for any audible leaks while we're under here. As we come out from our tractor, we want to check to make sure that the reflectors on the rear of our mud flaps, that they're in good condition, that they're shining properly, that they're clean. We want to check our mud flap. We want to make sure the mud flap is in good condition, not dragging on the ground, must be at least 18 inches off the ground. It's not touching anything, it's not ripped or torn. We want to check our mud flap hanger to make sure it's securely mounted to the tractor, to make sure that it's not going to go and hit the wheels, and everything seems to be in good order. As we come around to the side of our wheels here, we want to notice the inside top of our tire, of the inside wheel. We're going to check our tread. We want to make sure we have at least 2 32 inch tread depth in all major grooves to make sure it has even wear across the inside tire. We want to check the outside of the inside tire to make sure we have no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. We also want to check our rim on the inside tire on the outside of it to make sure there's no cracks or welds other than factory. We also want to check the space between our duals, our bud spacing here. We want to make sure we have no objects in between our bud spacing to make sure the wheels are not touching and that there's no rocks or wood or any debris that could fly up and hit something. Now we're going to check the inside of our outside tire for any abrasions, bulges, or cuts. We want to make sure the tire's in good condition. We also want to check the inside of our outside rim to make sure there's no cuts, welds, or cracks other than factory. We want to check the top of our outside tire. We want to make sure that it's got even tread wear. Our tires are even on both sides. There's no bias ply with radial. We want to make sure that they're evenly sized. We make sure we have at least 2 32 inch of tread depth on our outside tire. As we come around, we want to check the outside of our outside tire. Make sure there's no abrasions, cuts, or bulges. We want to check the inside of our outside rim. And we want to make sure that the rim is in good condition, that we don't see any cracks or welds other than factory. Again, we're going to check each lug nut to make sure it's tight. We want to make sure that each lug nut has no rust trails coming off it. There's no shiny threads that would indicate a loose lug nut. If there was, we would get it tightened. We want to check now our axle seal. Our axle seal, we're checking to make sure we don't see any grease or oil coming from around the seal, and making sure all these nuts are in themselves tight as well. If we saw rust streaks or shiny thread, that would indicate a loose nut. The last thing I want to check on the outside here is to make sure I have a metal valve stem and cap on my tires. I want to make sure that the metal valve stem and cap are in place. I hear no audible leaks. And I would check the inflation of these tires to whatever the manufacturer spec on the tire was. I would check that either with a tire pressure gauge or with a mallet. Alright, coming to the front of the trailer. We want to check again, starting at the top, work our way down, front to back, side to side. We want to check on top, check our clearance lights up here. We want to make sure our clearance lights are in good condition, they're not broken or cracked, they're not missing. We'll check operation of them later. I want to check the bulkhead or the header board of our trailer to make sure we don't have any bulges, any rips, or any obstructions in the bulkhead of our trailer to make sure it's in good condition. I'll check to make sure I had an ID tag that told me the weight of my trailer, the maximum GVWR. I'm going to come down again. I'm going to check my air lines again as I did before, but I want to make sure that they're securely mounted and fastened, that I have no audible air leaks that I can hear. Make sure that my electric line is securely fastened and plugged in. I'm going to keep coming down and checking the front of my trailer. As I come around the side of my trailer, I want to check my reflective tape that goes down the side of my trailer. I want to look down the side and make sure I don't see any bulges in the trailer would indicate a problem with my trailer or the cargo inside it. As we come down the side of the trailer, any clearance lights that may be on top, I want to check to make sure they're in good condition. They're not broken, damaged in any way. As we come back here towards the landing gear of the trailer, I want to check my landing gear now to make sure that my landing gear is fully raised, fully supported, and that the feet of my landing gear are secure on both sides. I want to make sure there's no obstructions on my landing gear. I want to check the frame of my landing gear. I want to make sure my frame is securely mounted to the trailer it's not bent, broken, or damaged in any way. I want to check the handle, my crank handle. I want to make sure it's securely mounted in a safe carrying place. Make sure that my landing gear again is fully raised in the upright position while towing the trailer. I also want to check the clearance between the rear of my tractor and the landing gear to make sure I have plenty of clearance in between the two, so that when I turn sharp, I will not hit my landing gear. While I'm under here, trailer, we want to make sure that the frame and the ribs of the trailer are in good condition. These are our ribs right here. The frame is going to run down the side rails here. We want to make sure that our frame is in good condition. We're going to look to make sure we have no frame rails or anything that might be bent or broken that would be dipping down to indicate a problem. As we come back, we've already checked the clearance between our landing gear. We're going to come back out and check the frame as we go down through the trailer again on the side. As we come down the side of the trailer, again, we're noticing our reflective tape up here. We want to make sure it's in good condition. Coming down through here, we want to check to make sure we have reflectors here on the side, as well as clearance lights. And we also have a turn signal here. We want to make sure all these lens covers are in good condition. They're not cracked or broken, and it's clean. As we're looking back underneath, we're still checking the frame of the trailer, making sure the frame of the trailer is in good condition. We want to check our airlines back here. We want to make sure our airlines are securely fastened, make sure they're supported properly, and at least 18 inches off the ground, that they're not going to rub against anything. Again, we'd be back here listening for audible leaks as well. As we come to the rear of the trailer back here, we're going to check our sliding tandem to make sure it's in good condition. We want to make sure the sliding tandem is securely mounted, make sure that we have a pin in place to keep it from jumping out of place, which we do right here. We want to make sure that our pins are locked in place as well to make sure the sliding tandem will not move on us while we're transporting stuff. Again, checking our airlines as we come back, making sure we don't see any cuts, knots, or abrasions, and making sure we don't hear any audible leaks out of them. As we get here in the back, we want to check our rear tandems, but as we're doing this, we're going to go through the rear of the trailer where we can get a better view of everything that we want to see. All right, while we're underneath the trailer, we want to check to make sure all the airlines coming back to our brake chambers right here. Here's our airlines. We want to make sure we hear no audible leaks, that the airlines are in good condition. We want to make sure we don't see any cuts or frays or anything or rubbing areas that would cause the airlines to break. When we get back here to our brake chamber, again, we're going to check like we did on the tractor. We want to make sure they're securely mounted. We want to make sure that the clamps are in place and that they're tight, and we hear no audible leaks coming from that. When we get to the rear to check our push rod coming out of our brake chamber, we want to make sure it's not bent or broken. We want to make sure that it's got a pin with a cotter pin in it where it hooks to the slack adjuster. Now, with my wheels chalked, my brakes released, I'm going to pull on my slack adjuster, and I should not have any more than 1 inch of play in my slack adjuster. We have no play. At this time, I want to check my springs while I'm right here. I want to make sure I have no loose, missing, or shifted springs. I want to make sure that they're all lined up properly, no more than 1/4 are missing. I'm going to check, make sure that my U-bolts are in good condition, that they're tight, and that the bolts are tight, and the nuts are tight at the bottom. I want to check my spring hangers on the front, up here, and I also want to check my spring hanger in the back here. I want to make sure that they're securely mounted, make sure they're not broken, and make sure all bolts are in place and tight. While I'm under here, I want to check the inside or the inside of my rear inside tire, and I want to make sure that I have no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. I want to check my rim. And I want to make sure the rim does not have any cracks or welds other than factory, and that it's in good condition. Again, I'm going to check my brake shoes again here, just like I did on the tractor. I want to make sure they're not worn dangerously thin. They have at least 1/4 inch of brake left on them. There's no grease, soot, or oil on them that would cause braking problems. I'm going to check my drum right here. I want to make sure the drum is not cracked or have any welds other than factory, and that there's no more cracks in that, more than half the friction area. From there, I want to check and make sure I have no grease, soot, or oil on the brake drum as well. But I want to go ahead and check my mud flap on the back. I want to make sure my mud flap is securely mounted, it's not torn, it's at least 18 inches off the ground, it's not rubbing anything, and it's in good condition. As we go to the outside of the vehicle, as we do our inside tire, we want to come across the top of our tire to make sure we have even tread wear, and make sure we have at least 2 32nds of tread depth on this tire as well. Make sure it's in good condition. I want to check the outside of my inside tire to make sure I don't have any abrasions, bulges, or cuts. Make sure it's in good condition. I want to check my rim down here to make sure I don't have any cuts or welds other than factory. I'm checking the space in between my wheels to check my bud spacing. I want to make sure I have no obstructions in there. Make sure my wheels are not touching. Make sure my tires aren't touching anything. And I want to make sure I have no rocks or debris in there that could come out and cause an accident. I want to check the inside of my outside tire to make sure I have no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. I want to check my rim on the outside wheel to make sure, again, it has no cracks or welds other than factory. Coming across the outside of my outside tire here, I want to check to make sure I have even tread wear and make sure I have at least 2 32/2 inch tread depth. Make sure that my tire is matched, even sized. Coming to the outside of my tire, I want to check the outside of my tire again for any abrasions, bulges, or cuts. Make sure it's in good condition. I want to check my rim again on the outside. I want to make sure my rim has no cracks or welds other than factory. I want to come and check my lug nuts here. Each lug nut I want to touch, I want to make sure that they're tight, that there's no rust coming off them. I see no shiny thread that would indicate that there'd be a loose nut. I want to check now, again, this is a hub seal back here, not axle, and I want to make sure that my hub seal is not leaking and that there is no visible signs of any grease or oil coming from that. If I could see in there, I would make sure I had proper level of oil or grease, and I would also make sure that if I could take the cap off, I could put my finger in there and touch that as well. Now I would like to check to make sure I have a metal valve stem and cap on my rear wheel. With that, I'm going to check my inflation on my tire. On the inflation of the tire, I would go by the manufacturer's spec to make sure that it was inflated properly, and I would make sure I would check that with either a tire pressure gauge or a mallet. As we come down the back of our trailer, again, we're still checking our reflective tape. We're checking our tie holders here where it holds the doors. Make sure they're securely fastened. We want to check our rear reflector on the back of the trailer. You'll notice on the trailer, everything in front of the wheels is going to be amber in color. Everything behind the wheels is going to be red in color. If this trailer had an ABS system on it, it would have an ABS light here on the back. It'd be an amber in color. As we come around the back of the trailer, we want to notice, again, start at the top, and we want to work our way down. We want to notice our reflective tape to make sure it's in good condition. Make sure that we have reflective tape around our door. We want to check our doors, all the hinges, to make sure they're properly mounted, make sure we have no broken, damaged, or missing hinges. Make sure our doors are in good condition. We want to check our door seals. We want to make sure we have good door seals on our trailer, make sure it's securely fastened. If we can open our doors, we want to make sure that our doors are in good shape, that we have nothing to worry about. We want to fasten our doors, make sure they lock properly. As we're coming down the doors, we want to make sure our reflective tape again is in good condition across the back, making sure we have a chain or tie on the back to be able to hold our doors open when they're open. Checking our lights on the rear of the trailer. We want to check all our lens covers, turn signals, brake lights, tail lights, reflectors on the back, as well as four-way. We want to make sure that all our lens covers are clean, not broken, cracked, or missing. We want to check our clearance lights across the back, make sure they're clean, not broken, or missing, and in good condition. Check our tag to make sure we have a good tag, to make sure that our tag is current and that our tag light here is clean, not broken, or missing. We'll check operation later. As we come across, we want to check the right side tail lights, make sure they're clean, not broken, damaged, or missing, as well as our reflectors back here. We want to make sure both sets are in good condition. Checking our ICC bumper here, we want to make sure it's in good condition, make sure it's not bent, and make sure that it's there. At the inside of the cab, we want to make sure that when we get in the truck that we got 3 points of contact. We're going to grab the bar, make sure we grab our door handle or our steering wheel. As we're getting ready to go in, I want to notice that we have a fully charged and rated fire extinguisher of 5 BC or better. As we get up in, we're going to be careful, grab our handholds. 3 points of contact at all times. Okay, as we get in the truck, first thing I want to do, I want to check to make sure my seatbelt's in good condition. I'm going to pull on my seatbelt. I want to notice that I have no cuts or frays in my seatbelt, that it's in good condition. I want to check to make sure it latches properly and connects, make sure it releases properly, and put my seatbelt in. As I'm sitting in the truck, again, I'm going to start my way from the top to the bottom again. I want to look at my windshield. I want to make sure my windshield's clean, not broken, damaged, no cracks, no stickers that would impede my view. I want to check my wipers while I'm looking at them right here. I want to make sure that they're firmly against the glass of the windshield. I want to check my mirrors on both sides. I want to look out my mirrors, and I want to make sure that my mirrors are adjusted properly. They're clean, not broken or damaged. As I'm sitting here, I want to just notice the overall general condition of my cab to make sure I have nothing on the floor that might get under my feet. I want to go ahead now and perform a safe start. Okay, as we perform our safe start, we're going to turn our key. First thing we want to do is check our gauges as they come up. We want to check if we have an ABS light to make sure that our ABS light comes on and goes out immediately. After our small light check, we're going to do a safe start. We're going to push our clutch in. make sure we're in neutral, put our foot on the brake pedal, make sure that our brakes are set, pulled out. We're going to start our truck. Keys on, we're going to push our button and start our truck. As the truck starts, we're going to give it a second, come off our clutch nice and easy. As we're off our clutch, take our foot off the brake. While we're letting our air pressure build up, I want to go ahead and I want to notice my oil pressure is coming up, that it's in good working range. Check my water temperature gauge. Eventually that'll start to come up as the truck warms up. Check my voltmeter to make sure it's registering above 12 volts, and I'm going to rev it up to make sure that the needle comes up a little bit. Same with the oil pressure. Looking over here, I want to make sure I have proper amount of fuel in my truck. And now I want to check my air pressure. I want to make sure that my air pressure gauges are rising slightly, that they're going to come up to 120 psi or above, and make sure that my governor cuts out. I will wait for that point before I turn the truck off. I'm going to rev the engine a little bit, that way it'll build the air pressure a little bit quicker. Now this gauge here has two needles in it. One is the primary, one is the secondary. I'm going to make sure both needles come up properly. Do it. While I'm waiting for my air pressure to build, which is almost there, I'm going to check a few more things. I'm going to check my city horn. I'm going to check my country horn. And I want to make sure I manually check all these things physically with my hands. I don't want to leave anything untouched. I want to go ahead and check my heater and defroster. I want to put it on warm. I want to check my defroster, put it over to defrost and turn it on. I want to feel to make sure I have air coming out of my defroster vent. I'm going to put it on the floor, check my heat, make sure I got heat coming out of my floor. I'll turn it off. I want to check my air compressor is almost up. I'm going to go ahead and check my windshield wipers while I'm waiting. Turn my wipers on to make sure they're working fine. I want to check my windshield washer fluid. If we have no washer fluid at this time, I would fill that reservoir up, but I'd make sure it worked. Turn my wipers off. Alright, my air pressure is at 120 psi, ready to go. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and shut my truck off. And I want to go ahead and check my inside lighting indicators. First thing I want to check is my left indicator to make sure it's working. I'm going to check my right indicator to make sure it's working. I want to check my four-way emergency flashers to make sure they are working properly. Now I want to turn my lights on, and I want to check to make sure that my high beam switch indicator here is working as well. Headlights are on. I'm going to check the high beam switch, the blue light, to make sure that my blue light for my headlights work. They come on, they come off. I'll turn my lights back off now. They're in the off position. Now that I have a fully charged air system, I'm going to go ahead and do my air brake check at this time. At this time, I want to release my brakes, make sure my wheels are chalked, which they are. Okay, I'm going to release my brakes. All right. After my initial air loss, with my foot off the brake, I want to make sure I lose no more than 3 psi per minute. I will count once my minute's up. Now I'm going to apply 90 pounds of pressure to my brakes. After the initial loss there, I want to make sure I lose no more than 4 psi per minute. All right, a minute's up there. At this time, I'm going to turn my key to the on position, but not start the vehicle. And I want to begin a pump down. At this point in time, I'll pump my brakes down to approximately 60 psi or before. I should get a low air warning light or buzzer come on the dash. I have a low air warning light that came on right there. Buzzer will come on when the truck is started. At this time, and if you'll notice, my air pressure is at 60 psi. I'm going to continue to pump down, and somewhere between 20 and 40 psi, I should get a lower, or I should get my spring brakes to pop out. That would be my parking brake and my trailer air supply, which is also my tractor protection valve. I'll continue to pump down. And at such time, my brakes should pop out, showing that my spring brakes are on. Both my spring brakes have popped out. That indicates that my brakes are on. It came on approximately 30 psi. At this time, this concludes my air brake check. Now I'm going to build my air pressure back up. Once I've got it back up to 120 psi, I'm going to perform a pull test to make sure that my parking brakes are holding the vehicle in place. After that, I will do a service brake test to make sure that my service brakes work properly. So at this time, I'm going to perform another safe start. My key is on. Push my clutch in. I'm in neutral. My brakes, yes, they are set because they just came out. Foot on the brake and start my vehicle. Off the clutch nice and easy. Come off my brake. And as you can hear, there's a low air pressure warning light and buzzer now that the truck is running. I'm going to rev the engine up to get some air pressure a little bit quicker. While I'm letting it warm up and get the air pressure built back up, last couple of things I want to check while I'm in the cab. I want to make sure that I have 3 reflective triangles. Which I do, 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to check my glove box if I had one, or some place that might be able to hold my spare electrical fuses or circuit breakers, depending on the vehicle. I want to make sure that I have some. In this holder right here, I have spare electrical fuses. This truck takes fuses. Other trucks may take circuit breakers. We've already went over the fire extinguisher. All right, my air pressure is built back up. My lights have gone off at 60 psi like they should. Once we reach the maximum or the minimum, which is 100 psi, I can do my tug test or pull test, whichever you want to call, to make sure that my parking brakes are holding. All right, at this time we're at 100 psi. The truck will still build air. I'm going to go ahead and perform a parking brake test. I'm going to check the parking brakes on the tractor first. To do so, I'm going to make sure my parking brake is pulled out and my trailer air supply is pushed in, releasing my trailer brakes. Push my clutch in, my foot on the brake. I'm going to put it in a low gear, and I'm going to slightly tug against the tractor to make sure it holds. Which it does. Put it back in neutral. I'm going to set my trailer brake. I'm going to push in the parking brake of the tractor and check to see that my parking brakes on the trailer hold. Again, put it in low gear and pull against the trailer brakes. And they hold as well. Now I'm going to set both brakes. To do a service brake test, I would recommend, rather than trying to pull through the parking lot, because you may be in a confined area, to explain to the examiner how you would do this. How I would do a service brake test is I would release both my valves, and at this time I will do that with my wheels. Have my wheels chalked, make sure I release my valves. I would pull forward in a low gear, approximately 5 miles per hour. At that point in time, I would step on my brakes, and I would check to note any pulling to one side or the other or grabbing by my brakes on my tractor. To check the trailer brakes, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to pull forward slowly in a low gear, approximately 5 miles per hour. I'm going to pull down on my trailer hand valve to note whether my service brakes on my trailer are working properly. At this time, I've completed my pre-trip and my I'm going to set my brakes, turn my vehicle off. I'm going to hold on to my key in case I do need it. I would also like now to ask the examiner if he could please help me with an external light operation check. What I want him to do is I want him to go to the front of the vehicle, and I am going to have him check, again, starting at the top, working my way down. I want to check my clearance light across the top of the cab, and I will point to each and every section of the lights that I'm going to do. That way he knows what I'm doing. I want him to check the clearance lights on my cab. From there, I want him to come down. I want him to check my headlights, my high and low beam on my headlights. I want him to check my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my four-way emergency flashers to make sure they all work. Once he completes that, I would like for him to come around the left side of the tractor to the driver's side. I want him to check any clearance lights or turn signals on the side of my tractor. As he's going towards the back of the tractor, I want him to look up and check the clearance lights on the front bulkhead of my trailer to make sure that they're working properly, and also on the side top of my trailer as he goes down the side of the trailer. I would like for him to go to the rear of the tractor, and I would like for him to check to make sure that my brake lights are working, make sure that my left and my right turn signal and my four-way emergency flashers work, and make sure that my tail lights are working properly, and any clearance lights that may be back there as well. Once he does the tractor, I would like for him to go down the side of the trailer, check any clearance lights that may be on the top or bottom of the trailer rail on the side to make sure they're working properly. I would like for him to check my left turn signal to make sure that it is blinking properly on the left side of the trailer. As he goes to the rear of the trailer, I would like for him to check any red clearance lights that may be behind the rear wheels to make sure they're working properly, and also on the top of the trailer, any clearance lights that may be on to make sure they're working properly. As he goes around the back of the trailer, I'd like for him to start at the top and check my clearance lights if I have them up there to make sure they're working properly. Move his way down. I would like for him to check my left turn signal, my right turn signal, check my brake lights, check my parking lights, and also check my four-way emergency flashers back there. I have 3 clearance lights in the middle of my trailer on the bottom, above my ICC bar, and I would like for him to check those as well to make sure they're working. The last thing I would like for him to check would be my tag light to make sure that is working properly. At this time, this will complete my pre-trip inspection. As the examiner is going around checking the lights, I will point to each one or yell out the window to tell him which one to check. I will watch for him to give me a thumbs up to make sure that they are working properly. This completes the pre-trip inspection.